bunch of people yesterday down the Creeper, or up the Creeper Trail, which is even harder to do. But Mark, we're so glad you're here, and we welcome you warmly.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, John. Thank you for that introduction. The Graham family and I go back to the late 80s, early 90s, when I first got involved in all this craziness. And it is great to see you again, Ken. It's great to see you with everything you do for economic development for the community. A lot of friends in this room. And Mr. Marion, thank you. Although I have to say, I'll always have a great spot in my heart for David, who served Marion so long and so well. The thing I think I should have gotten a little credit for, where are we sitting? Who was the governor and helped find some state funds to make sure we have It is great, Marion Hack. Of course, I'm going to make sure I don't do politician rule number 1, never put a hat on. Anybody old enough to remember Michael Dukakis? See, if you're north of kind of our age, you get that joke. Otherwise, who was Michael Dukakis? So it is great to be back in Southwest Virginia, in Smith County, and Marion. I saw the police chief before. We got a little extra funding as well for the police academy. And I was last in Marion, I think it was right after Hurricane Helene. And I want again to say thanks to all the first responders. I know there were lives saved here in the county because of the courage of those first responders on the swiftwater rescue. And again, I don't want to get all the good news out in the front because I got some bad news to talk about too. But we did do very well on Hurricane Helene relief. We've got a lot of money in the till. We've got to make sure that it actually comes, because we are unfortunately in a time right now where Congress, usually in a bipartisan way, passes legislation and appropriates money, and the new administration is arbitrarily deciding whether that money ought to go out or not. And that's candidly just not the way our Constitution or our system works. And what I'm going to try to do today is do something that is hard for any politician, especially a senior senator, which is to talk less and listen more. And you'll be the judge at the end of the session whether I met that goal or not. But I thought I'd open up with just a little bit of a state of play. It's hard. I think we're 83 days into the new administration. In dog years, it feels like 10 years. And it's your point, John, that I have always believed that if you can get things done in a bipartisan fashion, it's better. And the reason is not so much because it's intellectually better, but the truth is Congress, whichever party's in control, usually is going to screw things up and not get it 100% right, even if they're directionally right. And if you have both parties involved in whatever the solution is, then both parties have to own how you come back and fix things. And when it's only one party, you get things sometimes jammed through. And what's happening now in our government is it's not even Congress acting. It's the president acting, I think, arbitrarily on these executive orders. I just saw that President Trump has signed less legislation in his first 100 days than the last 15 presidents, but he signed 132 executive orders, or I may be off one or two, depending on what happened last night or this morning. And frankly, is trying to grab a lot of the power away from Congress. And I think it's going to be a time when our institutions are going to be absolutely tested. And I say that whether you are a Trump supporter or a non-Trump supporter. And I think it's going to be an extraordinarily important time for us. I think the president was hired because he was going to bring prices down. That's what he promised folks. And yet, so far, we've seen the opposite. And, as somebody who's spent a lot of time in this job thinking about kind of the global economy and how we bring more manufacturing back home, I was proud that I was the author of the CHIPS bill to try to bring semiconductors back into America. Some level of targeted tariffs against a country like China, that makes some economic sense. But the idea that you're going to put tariffs on friends and foe alike all over the world, what that's going to result in is higher costs for all of us. I got pretty upset about 10 days ago when we had the trade representative in, and I was going, we actually need to keep allies in our country. I think we're stronger that way. And they put a big old 10% tariff on Australia. Australia, we have a free trade agreement with. Australia's our partner on building submarines. Australia, we actually have a trade surplus with them. So why are we going out and whacking our friend there? And what it's doing is it's turning countries away from us. And I don't think, again, long-term that helps us. And I'm going to, again, try to not go down that whole rabbit hole, because I got a lot to say as Vice Chairman of the Intelligence Committee about what's going on in the world, and maybe there'll be some questions on that topic. But ultimately, those tariffs are going to mean higher prices for Americans. And what I worry about now, and I say this as somebody, I take great pride in the fact that I was blessed to have a successful business. I failed the first 2 times miserably, got a third try at cell phones and did well. I hope I'm self-aware enough to realize that if I'd not been a white guy with that appropriate education that the mayor mentioned, I might not have gotten 3 chances or 2 chances. And one of the things in our country is everybody ought to get a fair shot. You can't guarantee you success, but you ought to get a fair shot. And I worry at times when we've got this economic policy and it feels like if you're a giant corporation, you can get relief. If you're a small manufacturing business in the 81 corridor, you don't get that relief. And these tariffs are going to cause an immediate cost adjustment that you'll feel on buying anything. I worry about that. I worry about the fact that one of the things, I was there when we did the ribbon cutting on, it's going to be a remarkable facility in terms of substance abuse and what, the beds. It really is I think the kind of thing, community collaboration, that again represents in my mind Southwest Virginia's greatest hallmark. Your communities are so self-reliant. Well, that self-reliance shouldn't have to mean that the feds can't do their part to help. And the way we got those funds for John and the effort was called congressionally designated spending. That's Washington ease for earmarks. But unfortunately, whether it was the Agents Hope or whether it was for the police in terms of some training facilities, when we didn't come together on a budget, what we're doing is we're doing something called a continuing resolution, which means we're just using last year's budget. It means all those projects that Tim and I personally vet, try to approve, they all got put on hold. And that means, again, your communities are going to get, not going to get the funds that I think you deserve and are appropriate. And then I'll wrap this up so I won't try to adhere to my comment that I'll talk less and listen more. But I was just in Abington where Scott Miller, the dentist that originally was up in Hone Acres, come down, and the clinic there where they're now have got 8 residents and a whole bunch of dentists and providing an enormous amount of benefit, although I can quickly say they still got a 2,300 person waiting list that we need to get them some additional tools on. And we saw the whole process where they can take the time it takes you to get a crown or a denture from 5 visits to 2 visits with this new technology happening right here in Abington. And that's going to save people money and it's going to save people time. But again, if the president cuts Medicaid, if those cuts come to Medicaid, not only in the Medicaid expansion, will that kind of clinic shut down? And you may say, well, listen, I got private insurance, I don't have to worry about that. But I fear you make the kind of cuts that are being talked about in Medicaid, every rural hospital in America will shut down. And I just can't understand in a certain way, and I know from some of the folks in the crowd, we've got some advocates here, and that's part of the job as well. But I just can't understand how parts of rural America voted 70% plus for President Trump, and these Medicaid hits, if the Congress approves those, are disproportionately going to help rural communities. And again, I think we're a better country and a better people than that. And whether it's resist or whether it's talk to our friends and neighbors, but we can't let this go through. There are 1,000 other issues or 1,000,000 other issues. It's kind of a little bit like each day you wake up and see what's the new EO of the morning. And you kind of wonder, there's so many things coming at you every day, you almost have to pick, and rightfully those of you who are Democrats say, well, you need to do more of this or this. Trying to figure out where you spend your time and energy is a challenge without losing, and I think, and again, I say this with trepidation that some of y'all may rightfully disagree with me on this, but I still think at the end of the day, we got to see if we can find common cause that have supported the president, or at least to find some common cause to say, we can't drive this economy over the cliff. We can't drive America's reputation for the last 75 years post-World War II over the cliff. We can't put economic burden or take the world's strongest economy and candidly kind of blow it up with economic theories that, candidly, there's a reason why 95% of the economists think you put worldwide tariffs on, you're going to drive prices up. They will say the last time I think we had tariffs this high, it was, and I will stop after this, it was like Smoot-Hawley, and they'll say, well, you know what? That was back in the 1930s, and we did have a little trade surplus. We also had the biggest depression in our country's history. And we could be staring at that kind of economic outcome again, an economy that's more intertwined. We need to bring more manufacturing jobs back, but there's a smart way to do it and a stupid way to do it. And my fear is right now, what we're seeing in Elon Musk and the Doge Bros is a chainsaw massacre to a whole lot of government programs that candidly have been bipartisan supported for the most part, where these young guys are coming in and cutting things, I think, without any knowledge at all. And the real question is going to be, will Congress take its power back? Or going to be passively allow us to kind of just go along? And that's why you need to press me, you need to press all of our congressional representatives to, it doesn't mean you've got to disagree with the president on everything, but it does mean you have a constitutional obligation to allocate funds, to provide oversight, to follow these things. I'm not supposed to get ahead of myself here. This will be the last statement, then I'm going to the VA hospital in Salem tomorrow. And this new administration is trying to prevent me as the senior senator from going to the VA hospital. We are going to have, stay tuned on what may happen tomorrow. I've been at the VA in Salem dozens of times as governor and senator. We just built 2 VA hospitals, one outside of Fredericksburg, one down in Chesapeake. It took us 10 years to build them. We can't fill them with VA employees, because who's going to go work for the VA if your job's going to be cut tomorrow? And we will see how this gets resolved. But if this administration tries to stop constitutionally directed members of Congress from doing their oversight job on a federal facility, there'll be some hell to pay. So, not to jump ahead of myself, but this is... All right. So, I'm going to stop talking, and you're going to start talking. So, this is a town hall open session. I'd only ask you to make your speeches shorter than mine before you ask the question. But I want to hear from you. Please.
Appeared before the committee. feet to the fire when they lied to you. And I think America, Democrat and Republican, maybe a lot of closet Republicans, but America wants to know when we'll return to the rule of law and respect for our Constitution. And I believe the Democrat leadership, had they desire, should they desire, to state that anybody who appeared before the Senate, whether it's for confirmation hearings or whatever, will be held accountable for their perjury when they came before your committee, whether it be a Supreme Court justice or a department head of the current administration.
Yeah, I would just say that we were talking about when we had the Director of National Intelligence come in, and she refused to acknowledge whether, this was in the question of when they were using the signal chat, and they were using classified information on this non-secure channel, which I can tell you, if any member of the military or any CIA agent had done that, they'd be fired tomorrow. And the awful thing about this was, if that information had gotten out, the men and women who were taking that bombing attack against the Houthis from the USS Truman that was home ported in Norfolk, they could have been killed. And boy, I got an earful from a town hall I had in Virginia Beach and Chesapeake. And we just have to demand better. This theme will come out as some of these questions say you need to do X, Y, and Z. We've got, when you're in the minority, which we are, you got a right to litigate, you got a right to complain, but until we can get a majority, you can't have a minority-owned position to kind of get all these rules enforced. So that's one of the reasons why I see you resist, and I believe that we need to resist. But I also need to be, it's not like I got to convert of the 53 Republicans in the Senate. I only get 4 or 5 folks to vote a different way. And one of the things that, again, I'm violating every rule I said about short, but the number of, this is the part that makes me a little bit crazy. I get all these Republican senators, good people, coming up to me going, Mark, keep doing that. Mark, you're our conscience. As I call some of this stuff, I don't want to be your damn conscience. I want you to grow. I want you to stand up and use your voice. You are an elected representative of whatever state. Say what you please. Don't whisper in my ear. Next question.
Senator, I'm a general pediatrician here in Marion, and we have 2 big concerns. One being Medicaid. Of course, as you said, Medicaid expansion, not only rural hospitals, but our pediatric office, we're about 65% Medicaid for our overhead. So not only is that our office salary, our nurses, our front office staff, but also at Medicaid here in Virginia, we're only 82% of what Medicare pays, so that's already a concern for us. The other being vaccines. Marion Elementary is only at about 86% of completed MMR rate for the incoming kindergartners this past year. So should measles...
What was that? If that was 86, what was that, say, 10 years ago? Do you know?
About 95 to 96%. It dropped to under 80% in 2020 during COVID, which everybody dropped. I'm also the Virginia AAP immunization chair for the Virginia AAP chapter, so that's why I know a lot of these statistics. Yeah. But our big concern, of course, is going to be measles as well. So one child in the classroom who has measles exposes anybody who's not fully vaccinated. It's 21 days from the last onset. So that could be up to, if there are 4 or 5 children who are eventually infected with measles, 3 months of being home without being in school. So the big protections that we're worried about are Medicaid and vaccines. We didn't know, we wanted to ask them, where are you working to protect on that, and what are some things we can do?
Well, thank you. Thank you for what you're doing. And I heard on the radio this morning, I didn't realize, as somebody who had measles as a kid, that measles is the most contagious disease that's out there.
Yes, it's one person and like 12 to 18 people.
Wow, it makes COVID look like nothing. Let me just say, on Medicaid, I do believe that will be the line that they won't go over, but from my lips and your lips to God's ears, we need to continue to encourage our members of the House and other senators to stand by that. On the vaccines, I'm going to come around, yes. On the vaccines, just very quickly, I can't believe in 2025 we're moving away from science at the level we are moving away from science. Kennedy, who I voted against. And if you did see my testimony there, he didn't have the foggiest idea about Medicaid or Medicare and how they interrelate. But it just scares the dickens out of me. Because if you stand up against science and say, you don't do new vaccines, or what's even, you talk about saving money. If we cut off some of these studies from NIH midstream, you've just wasted all the money because you got to go back and restart. So I just hope and pray that we can loosen up some of those funds too. There was a series of folks over here. Please.
Where are they going to get the $880 billion if it's not from Medicaid cuts?
Who I think you are? I know you are, Jane. Her husband did a great job in the General Assembly when I was there. It's great to see you. You know what? Bingo! You can't cut $880 billion without cutting Medicaid. If they hit that number, it will be cut. No matter what they say, they will say, oh, it's a reform, or oh, it's hocus pocus. It will be a cut. Plain and simple. Anybody says differently, can't do math. Yes, sir.
Here, Marion. And I wanted to ask you, something extraordinary happened yesterday. The President of the United States and the President of Venezuela, Salvador, thank you, openly defied the Supreme Court of the United States by denying the return of an American citizen that was mistakenly, you know the story. So the question is, what do we do when the President of the United States openly defies a Supreme Court ruling?
So much for foreplay. This is where the rubber hits the road. Now the administration will try to say, well, they didn't say you had to send him back. They'll try to bob and weave. It's going to happen again. And the question is this. I've got a dozen plus Republican senators who've said to me, oh, don't worry, Mark, we will stand the line when it comes to adhering to the Supreme Court. We're going to find that out over the next couple of weeks. And, I've not been one to kind of be on the hyperbole end a lot of times. Again, those of you who are hardcore activists, I know get pissed at me regularly because I try to do too much with the other side. But this is a moment in time. If they go against the Supreme Court, if they take away Congress's power to appropriate money and have those appropriations adhered to, then we no longer have a constitutional democracy in this country. And the only way that will happen.
Well, we're all concerned with the Trump administration trying to destroy academic freedom on our college and university campuses. That is dangerous. Public schools in the country were given 10 days to prove that they didn't have DEI. Law firms, prestigious law firms, are capitulating to Trump and giving away millions in free legal fees. And it's so frustrating. We call Morgan Griffith's office, we protest, and we just feel so hopeless. Every day is worse. So what else can we do?
Well, I think what you can do. One, I appreciate you raising your voices. But two, if everybody here said we're all going to have to get a little bit uncomfortable and talk to our friends and neighbors who candidly support the president, who support our friends on the other side, and try to break through on that individual basis. If the next time we had one of these, the average age wasn't closer to mine and more like 25 or 30, because candidly, those of us who are in the Social Security era, we're on our last act, but some of these changes could affect young people for generations. That's one of the things that always makes me crazy. Young people say we can ignore Congress when Congress makes the rules for young people. And I don't have, the answer I have is that this country is worth standing up and fighting for. I think we're going to get to the breaking point, and there will be a big backlash. And I think it'll be bipartisan. But I also believe there's so much structural damage being done that even if you change the policies back, and I have to acknowledge, I'm not sure, this always used to be kind of viewed as a good thing. Now I'm not sure it's a good thing. My mom's parents were from Canada. How do you turn Canada into an enemy? I had a bourbon maker from Richmond. It's going to come a heck of a long time, even if they get rid of all the tariffs, before Canadians start buying American booze again. And, I mentioned the Australia case, or the fact that we spent 15 years trying to encourage Japan and South Korea. Don't buy from China. A lot of bad things. China's doing some really bad stuff. But all we've done is ruin 15 years, including Trump the first term, about weaning them off of China, and when we pushed them back right into this. So, the litany of these issues, man, in terms of education, she's taking notes, I'm not sure it's all noteworthy, but amen, and I've been blessed to do very well in this country. I absolutely believe in our free enterprise system. It's got problems, but I still think when it works appropriately is the best. But it does make me, as a capitalist, really concerned when I see the biggest law firms in our country kowtow and get basically extorted, or when I see large corporates get exemptions and small businesses get screwed, or when we can suddenly say, and listen, I'll be the first to acknowledge the Democratic Party, I think, got a little too far out of the mainstream, and we shouldn't have been the word police, and it ought to be more about economic opportunity rather than simply identity politics. But that doesn't mean you go the complete opposite direction and say we're going to have a litmus test about what people can say on college campuses. And all of that is happening real time, but if we're going to make the changes, and I got to do my part, and Lord knows many of you doing your part, but we got to have this theater filled to the brim, and not just with the regular suspects. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Julian Miles. I live down in Abingdon. I'm involved with our Democratic Party there, and also with Take Action Southwest Virginia. We are doing our part to try to elevate visibility of what's going on. I'm very concerned about the possible imposition of martial law in the next couple of weeks. There's been a lot of rumor that could happen. Where's the point where we can't protest anymore, and what's going to happen?
Julie, the fact that is a legitimate question. I mean, that's the part that, I say, that's where we got to ask our friends and neighbors. Our country's always swings one way or the other, but I still think trying to do this stuff, in John Graham's words, find out what we can do together. But the fact that you're legitimately asking, I don't think it's going to happen. Because I don't think our institutions are that weak. But the fact that it's a legitimate question scares the dickens out of me, too. I'm going to do shorter answers. This young lady and this young lady.
Thank you for coming to hear our concerns. I really appreciate your urging everyone to stand up and do what they think is right. I'm concerned about Palestine. And what is the answer? Ceasefires have failed. And yet, Our government, the Senate, majority voted to continue funding it. Will you step up and join Tim Kaine on the next vote?
I knew this question was coming. Listen, what's happening in Gaza is horrific. But also what happened on October 7th, 2 years ago, was horrific. With Hamas, what they did. And every time that Bernie brings up, I will review these. I'm not going to make a commitment until I look at what happens next. There is a new peace offer back and forth right now. And I do think at the end of the day, it's going to have to include a Hamas disarmament, because if we had, and Hamas is a terrorist group, living down in Washington County, and we were in Smith County, because I know many of you have been there. The region is that small. But your point that we have to bring an end to this conflict is 100%, and I will redouble what I can do. I will also say the thing that's crazy at this point, from the Israeli government standpoint, is Saudi Arabia is ready to come in and bring diplomatic relations with Israel. That would do more to help potentially bring peace to the region. But that's not going to happen as long as this conflict in Gaza exists. So it's in Israel's self-interest as well.
Could I follow up on that?
Well, we're going to do it in some level.
I wanted to ask you about the military buildup in the Indian Ocean, Diego Garcia. Now, you spoke very eloquently in the beginning about bipartisanship, but frankly, we have a Republican Congress that seems pretty much without a spine and has been rolling over for whatever the administration wants to do. This hasn't been widely reported in the media. It was in The Economist that 1/3 of our B-2 bombers are sitting on an island in the Indian Ocean, poised perhaps to bomb Iran. And it looks like we may get involved in another war under the radar screen. What do you know about it? What are you doing?
I'm going to go around. I'll get you afterward, but it's going to be in order. I didn't know that number in Diego Garcia, but I do know we've got a second carrier there. We've got Jetson Jordan at this point. And, it is a huge concern. But the way, and we can, some of this I have to raise in classified settings about trying to get a pushback here, and I am doing that. And I think these next couple weeks, because you can't keep those forces deployed. And, this whole negotiation or whatever it is between the Trump administration and Iran, I wish if they could come to an agreement, I wish it well. But I also am concerned whether this is if it fails, then you end up with a conflict that could be devastating for the whole world. I also think that we need to acknowledge, and one of the things, an area that I'd ask you all to look at as well, is something I've been involved in for the last couple of years, is the conflict in Sudan. More people die in Sudan every day than Gaza and Ukraine combined. And boy, oh boy, again, we don't even have to invest money there. If we could just get the UAE and the Saudis to stop backing these two forces, we could actually bring about resolution. So I do hope we look in the context, there are a lot of conflicts around the world where I think America can play a role. Usually our role has been soft power, not necessarily hard power. But one of the reasons why I thought it was crazy that you get rid of USAID, which nobody in the military or the spy business thinks is a good idea, because it's a heck of a lot cheaper to resolve conflict or even feed people than put troops on the ground. But the Diego Garcia, I will check on specifically, but you're right about the buildup in the region. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to ask a question about how our leadership nationally is going to come forward and fight what's going on. We appreciate everything that you and Tim Kaine do for our state and our region, but obviously states can't do it on their own. And we have some that are fighting and some that are bending the knee, I would say. And as you said, a lot of them are coming privately and saying things to you, but either their lack of backbone or the even scarier part that they actually believe what's going on is right, keeps them from doing it. So for the Democratic Party and even for the Republican Party, what kind of national leadership? I mean, are we going to have somebody come forward? I know that's what a lot of people have complained about the last few years is, we didn't have a strong leader in our party. Even when Kamala Harris ran for president and we were backing her, it was that people still complained the leadership isn't there. Are we going to how do we get someone to step forward?
Well, listen, there are a couple of things. And for those, I want to hear concerned folks that are Democrats. I'd also like to hear from concerned folks who are independents and Republicans here too on issues. But I've been doing this for a while now. I've never been involved in a Democratic campaign, other than maybe Obama's first campaign where the word went, why don't you damn Democrats have a message? Because when you build a much bigger coalition, it's harder to come up with the three-word sound like no car tax was, which was the governor before me. And I do believe, and as somebody who's thinking about trying to do this one more time, I do believe we need, what I hope I can do is, if I get to do this again, is how do you bring on that next generation of leaders? There are a bunch of new folks. Alyssa Slotkin from Michigan, Ruben Gallego from Arizona, two of the new senators I think got real potential. Chris Murphy's a really bright guy. There's a bunch of, I've always been biased towards governors because I think governors are usually used to running things more. And we got a half dozen of them. But the thing that I think, and again, this is, I'm not really trying to punt on this, but it feels for those of us who are fully focused on this stuff, it does feel like it's been forever already. But for the vast majority of Virginians and Americans, the president's not even been in 100 days. It's not even been 3 months. That's not a great answer for what you're saying. I think there are a whole lot of folks. There's never been a time that I've been involved in politics where within the first 6 months after a presidential election, you automatically know who's going to be the next person. Matter of fact, that was probably more the Democrats' fault for a long time because we had people kind of line up until Obama kind of broke the who's next in line routine, which I think needs to be broken more. I'm not sure I can bring myself to say to appeal for more time when so much stuff is getting broken. So stay on my butt, stay on Tim's, but also please, 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 unless we convince other folks, and I also believe we need, one thing I want us to do, I'm taking off my Senate hat and put my Democrat hat. I want the Democrats to be, again, a pro-growth party. I want us to be a pro-opportunity party. I think we need to acknowledge that we sometimes got way over the top too regulatory. One of the things that makes me crazy, we put $42 billion out for broadband in the first year of Biden, and that was the infrastructure bill, which I helped negotiate. And not a dime of that got spent putting fiber in the ground because the regulatory process was too long. I do think we have to acknowledge, part of the crowd here, that we can do a better job. We can't, what I would hope we would not do, is if Trump, people have a second thought and think, all right, let's change. We go back to same old, same old. And that's gonna take young people like you. It's gonna take new ideas. We ought to be the innovation party. We ought to be the party that welcomes technology, but recognizes you gotta have guardrails on it. And those are not impossible things to do. I want to keep going. Look, here and here. I also want to get back to the young man on Palestine, so maybe we can do that afterwards. I know they're going to give me the hook in a couple minutes.
Hi, Senator. I'm Kathy Foreman. I live here in Marion. I want to thank you for coming. I want to thank your staff and regional offices and the DC.
If anybody gives another compliment to Shane Clem, you're all going to
They're feeling tremendous number of concerns from people, I'm sure. And I want to have a useful constituent. When I follow you on social media, I met your dogs. I see your daily posts in the car, on Instagram, Facebook. If you say, I am no on the say back, thank you, does it help to then say, thank you for being no on the say back? Or should I wait until, something else seems to be iffy before I weigh in? Thank you.
Well, one, I don't know how in the heck that anybody ever thought that I might ever vote to say that. You talk about all this, we still live in a state of the country that's majority women. Do you realize what the SAFE Act does? It basically says, God forbid you got married and you change your name, you gotta go through the whole body. It's crazy. So the question the answer I have is, listen, any politician loves to thank you. But I'd rather than simply saying thank you, if you would send out or retweet that to your friends. The truth of the matter is, and this is where, we all gotta learn new ways. It's only, the thing just is wild, it's only about 35% of Americans now that read the newspaper or watch TV news. So unless we communicate in a way online, and through social media, that's how we're gonna reach younger people. And one of the things that I think that Democrats can do a better job of is meeting people culturally where they are. Remember when I ran for governor, some of the fancy pants people in Northern Virginia gave me grief because I had a bluegrass band, and I sponsored a NASCAR truck, and I had sportsmen for Warner, and it didn't change my views, but it said I'm not going to disrespect you. And again, I think at times, and I'm not trying to be overly self-critical on my team, I can be much more self-critical on the other side, but I also think we have to, if we're going to convince a lot of folks to rethink some of their choices, we have to present something that's newer, fresher, and not just anti. Democrats can win it just on an anti-feeling against Trump, but that's not going to help the state or the country or the world if we don't have something positive. I'm going to keep going. When must we go? And then I'll come over there. Where's the other young lady?
So, my name's Sarah Taylor, and I live in Marion now, but I grew up in Sugar Grove across the mountain. And I came here today because I wanted to talk with you about something that is local. I don't know if you've heard about it or not, but the community of Sugar Grove in Smith County has no cellular service, and I've advocated for this for almost 20 years. So I have gone before our Board of Supervisors many, many times in that time period, and I've tried to do everything in my power to make this a possibility. Western Grayson County is going to power on a cell tower mid-July that is 6 miles line of sight from Sugar Grove. If we had a cell tower, it would likely provide service and triangulate and things like that. So I wanted to ask for your guidance today, and hopefully if there's anybody here from the Smith County Board of Supervisors, they will benefit from what I'm about to ask you. I have become aware of the Broadband Equity Access Deployment Program, BEAD, and there's also a Virginia Broadband Cellular Deployment Program. What can you tell us about that? What about those funds? How do we get them, and what is the timeline that we can try to get those? Thank you.
And your provider is Verizon. Who's your provider? Verizon. And US Telephone. This used to be my business, so I know something about this. And if you can get Shane the information, Okay, this is not a 30-second answer, so I'll try to give it. I think the truth of the matter is the large incumbent cell phone providers said if they got more spectrum, they'd build out a denser system. They didn't do it. So they're still kind of skimming the cream in denser populated areas. And rural Virginia is still getting left behind. And it's something, you know, before they get that BEAD money, I think they need to help filling in the spots. Now, the BEAD money is more for fiber. And then you got a question of whether, because that money may be in jeopardy now, because Virginia got $1.47 billion. We're going to have more than enough money. But Mr. Musk is trying to potentially put a hold of that and to completely change the program to open it up to satellite, you know, particular satellite that he might have an interest in. Yeah. So let me, rather than, you know, nerd out for 20 minutes on this, but there are things we do, and we got more money out because we had taken some of the ARPA money and got a treasury program, and Virginia is actually better positioned than anybody else. But if we don't get full fiber and, frankly, cell phone coverage by 27, 28, I was hoping 26, then it was a screw up from the administration and deployment of money. It's not a screw up in terms of lack of money. And I will get you more information, all right? There was a young lady over here that somebody, wasn't there somebody? And I think we're rolling down to the last couple, because I'm supposed to go to. Okay, here. Here, and then the young lady next to the camera.
Okay, tariffs you mentioned, and they've been so chaotic for businesses to deal with. Isn't that the role of Congress, and what is Congress doing in terms of the tariffs?
Thank you for citing the law and the Constitution. No, it is. What happened was, and Tim was really good on it. What Trump has done is he's declared these emergencies. Whether there's a question whether there is an emergency or not. And under emergency power, for a short term, the president can do this stuff. You know, but only if the emergency is legitimate. So we got 51 votes. We got the 4 Senate Republican senators to say, you can't do that on camera. Well, what happens is the House guy then, the speaker says, we're not going to have any chance of that going through. So it comes back again to we can write letters and go on TV and talk. But until we pick up 4 or 5 folks to vote in the Senate, or 3 or 4 in the House, goes back to the core that we keep coming back to. Does the Constitution and rule of law still mean something in 2025 in America? I hope and pray and believe it does. But if I had this same conversation with you all a month from now, and I'm still giving this answer, because, you know, short of, well, I'll be trying to bite my tongue for a moment.
Yes, hi. My name is Beverly Simmett. I live in Abington, and I had kind of a question. Donald Trump said he didn't know what Project 2025 was. We all, Democrats, know that they're following a plan. I don't see how working with the Trump administration is going to change anything with that, unless we just keep resisting. What can we do? I mean, we're out protesting, we're out doing calling and things of that nature. But how far are you from wanting to impeach this president? I think he needs to be impeached. I don't think that he is Project 2025. And I think people need to be talking about that. I think everybody does.
Well, I do believe the Republicans knew what Project 2025 was too. But it's just, so much of this stuff is just mean-spirited. You know, the guy, Russell Vogt, who's now the head of OMB, he was the author of 2025. He said he wanted to terrorize the federal workforce. Done a pretty damn good job. And I'm not saying, you know, but I saw Tim Sands, the president of Virginia Tech the other day, and they'd sent out their acceptances. People accepting the offers to go to Virginia Tech that people aspire to go to for their whole life was down 30% from folks in Northern, from across the whole class, because 85% of those people, one of the parents were either a government worker or a government contractor. That's Northern Virginia. That's coming through the whole economy if we're not careful. Your question about next step, I hear you. I also know you got to get a majority to do these things, but I respectfully believe at this point, this guy likes nothing more than to be in the center of attention on everything. And we've got to be willing to acknowledge that he can twist and turn things. I would rather us focus on the policies that are going to affect your life, because it's a heck of a lot easier to get a small business owner in Marion to step up against the tariffs if you form this not as a partisan issue, but as a business issue. It's a lot easier, I think, to get folks in higher ed to step up and protect First Amendment if we say, hey, think about the outcome, because there'll be a Democrat president if you can have this kind of, without making it all about, I could be wrong, but I just, I'll see you outside, I'll get with you, I'm not going to, and they're giving me, let me just, I'm sorry, flash.
Okay. I work at Blue Ridge Job Corps Center as a work-based learning coordinator, and I have seen right now, it's so uncertain with so many job corps closing, or the enrollment is being halted. How do you feel, or what's your stance on keeping the finances coming in? So these budget cuts have been just unreal. I mean, it's to the point that we really can't do anything for our students.
Yes, ma'am. Well, I strongly support Job Corps. I think it is a great program. I've done, 250 graduation speeches as governor and senator, colleges, high schools, you name it. Doing the graduation talk at the Marion Job Corps was a more powerful statement to me about the power of redemption and the power about how a little bit of help can change people's lives. So you got me at hello on the Job Corps. And what happens is they lump all of this stuff together, and this is where part of the sorting comes. That's my job. But I stand solidly, I got to get 4 more votes in the Senate and 4 more in the House, and we can protect Job Corps and all these other initiatives. Let me close with this. And the young man in Palestine, I'll see him. But no, I'm sorry. And I ask you this. Most of America at this point, the news comes on, they want to throw a shoe at the TV. And I have to say, I feel the same way, and I'm inside the TV sometimes. And frankly, I think there is an effort here, clearly from this administration, it's why some of your questions do that, to try to intimidate people. Good gracious, when you've intimidated the largest, wealthiest law firms in America to bend the knee, that is kind of a holy heck moment. But what I'd ask you is, I beg you frankly, that we can't give up. I mean, our country has gone through ups and downs in the past. This is maybe the most serious challenge in my lifetime. This is the most serious time I've ever had in this job, from being senator or governor or being active in politics. I believe our country is better than what is being put forward. I believe the American people are better than what's put forward. I do think those of us who are into this all the time, our heads are exploding. I think the vast majority of Americans who only marginally follow any of this, it's probably going to take a little more time until it hits them in the wallet on rising costs, or a rural hospital shuts down, or the young ladies that you've got given a second chance, those programs start, and suddenly you see crime in communities go up because people aren't getting that second chance. I just hope and pray that that moment of reckoning, of awakening of our country will happen before too much damage is done. And I will say to you that this notion of, I beg you to reach out to people that are not agreeing with you. I beg you to reach out to people that you go to church with or work with or see, and just try to have a civil conversation with them. And, everybody's got to do it their own way. I would not start with Donald Trump, this, that, and the other. I would start with, gosh, does it really make it fair to our small businesses when they're getting hit with all these rising costs on tariffs and big companies are not? Or is it really fair when we got a lot of communities in Southwest Virginia, 70% sometimes of the kids needing those Medicaid dollars? If we get rid of that Medicaid, where are they going to go? It's going to overwhelm the system. But I'm in the fight. I tell you this much, you all coming out here in these numbers on a Tuesday morning is extraordinary to me. You give me energy to go back. The truth is, we're not always going to agree. And that's one of the great things about our system is, my view of my job is, you hire me, I use my best judgment. If you don't agree with me, you fire me. And ultimately, at every level, because the only question that didn't get asked today, are there going to be elections in 2026? I believe there will be. But if we can do that at every level of government to get people that are maybe a little more open-minded, this is either going to break from the top, where he gets so excessive on something on national security or something where people will find their voice, or it's going to break where it probably will be from local communities. Or gosh, I didn't hire that to have my community, to get my Job Corps program taken away, or have my costs go up, or somehow, have things that we relied on get taken away. I'm in the fight. I beg you to stay in the fight. You get as the old, I don't know if he ever said it, but I've been using this quote for years. As Winston Churchill said, you can always count on the Americans to do the right thing after they've tried everything else. Well, with this kind, we're trying everything else. So God bless, we will get back to doing the right thing. Thank you for being in the fight. Thank you for coming out. Mr. Miller, thank you for having me. John, thank you for what you're doing. Ken, it's always good to see you. Next stop, Gillespie. Pardon me? Oh. So if you want to continue and harass me, you can come, and this will show that I am not some over-the-top super